I'd like to welcome David Boronkay of Slocum Hall Design Group. His presentation today is A Tale of Two Homes. This is an intimate group here, so I think if people have questions along the way, I think it'll be appropriate to just kind of raise your hand or kind of ask David to maybe expound upon something or offer an explanation. But A Tale of Two Homes is going to be an exploration into the process of designing for the luxury market. Comparably sized projects with similar budgets, but vastly different goals. So what happens when two projects similar in size and budget are completely different in concept? One, a new build that reimagines the Prairie style, combining modern sensibilities with design features reminiscent of Frank Lloyd Wright. And the other is a historic Neoclassical Revival, where the goal was to update its function for modern living, while thoughtfully preserving the home's historic merits and rich character. So David is going to take us through this Tale of Two Homes today. But before I turn it over to David, if you look into the chat, way at the top, there is a link here, and I will copy and paste it again so it's lower. If you need to get credit and you need a certificate, please follow that link. And the BSA will get that for you. The other thing that we'd like to mention each time is, number one, we're always looking for people to join our planning committee. We meet every other week on a Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. Our next meeting, well, our meeting was this morning, so our next meeting will be April 10th. And that's where we brainstorm and plan events like this, which will be on a monthly basis, and upcoming events. So today we were actually starting the planning process for an event in September with Bragby, the builders and remodelers of Greater Boston. The other thing is if you're not a member of our LinkedIn page, please become a member. The BSA is kind of starting a new initiative of how we can have a more immediate communication with our membership. So joining that group on LinkedIn will be helpful. And I'd also like to mention in April, our next presenter will be Jill Neubauer, and that'll be on April 17th, but there will be calendar postings and things about that. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, David, and get the program going.
It's Daniel. All right, well, good afternoon. My name is David Boronkay. I'm the principal of Slocum Hall Design Group. It would be nice if my slide would advance. There we go. Slocum Hall Design Group, founded in 2012. The firm consists of myself, two senior architects partners, Jane and Peter, two senior associate architects, Jaime and Adam, and then Liana Taft is our director of interior design, and Alyssa Haggerty is our senior associate interior designer. We're a full service firm. We offer both architectural services and interior design services. Our interior design services end off at soft goods. We're not resellers. We can help with furniture layouts, but we do not purchase custom goods. So on both the projects that I'll be showing you, there were outside interior designers who managed the procurement of furniture, selected colors, fabrics, etc. I personally have been obsessed with architecture from a very early age. Starting about the age of 6, I started drawing house plans, creating my own little masterpieces. If my parents had friends over, I would ask them what they wanted in a house and go upstairs to my room and design them a house. So that was their deliverable. My obsession with well-designed homes has carried me into adulthood. This image is the first house that I ever designed. My parents trusted the 24-year-old version of me to work with them to design their house on the Cape. And in the spirit of nepotism, family friends then hired me to do a 10,000 square foot house in Newton, and thus began my solo career. I was a sole proprietor until about the age of 33, and then I founded Slocum Hall Design Group with a former Syracuse classmate. She has since left the firm and gone off to Colorado due to her husband's professional moves. But Slocum Hall was the name of the architecture building at Syracuse, which is how the firm got its name. So today we will be discussing two projects, both of which are very special to me. One is a historic restoration project, and the other is a new construction project. I'm assuming you can decipher which one is which. The budgets were basically identical. The square footages of these houses are within 100 square feet of one another. They're both 13,000 square feet. The demographic profiles of the families are also quite similar, age, etc. So today I'll be starting with the house on Bellevue, which is this historic home. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. It even has its own Wikipedia page. It's the Charles Riley House. It was built in its current incarnation in 1896. The original house that was on the property was built in 1870, and the Rileys purchased it and did a major overhaul of the property, added 2.5 stories to it, and built a 10,000 square foot carriage house on the adjacent lot. The previous project I worked on with the owners was this home not a mile away from the current house. They had lived in this house for about 10 years. We converted the 2-bay garage into a family room, added a 3-bay garage, added 2 additional bedrooms. And once the project was completed, about 3 or 4 months later, the owners notified me that the house was still too small and they were going to start looking for a new home. I jokingly sent them the listing for Bellevue, thinking that they would never jump on it. And he emailed me immediately, when can we see this house? So thus began the process of reimagining this unbelievable piece of architecture. The house, as it sat on the site originally, there was the main house, there was the carriage house, which is off here to the left, which is, as I said, about a 10,000 square foot structure, which has since been subdivided into 6 townhouses. The previous owners of the property bought it in a blind auction, thinking they would never get it, and they got it. So when they took possession of the house, they needed to subdivide to essentially renovate and maintain the house. So they sold off multiple lots, including the townhouse. As you can see on the site plan, initially there was a physical and visual connection that linked both the main house and the carriage house site. Originally, you drive into the driveway through the porte cochere and then empty out onto the carriage house driveway. Similarly, there was a detached 2-car garage, which was only accessed from the carriage house driveway. What we did is we centralized all the circulation on the lot, giving a circular driveway and then creating this cart path through the woods that brings you down to the lower level where there's an auto court and the new 3-car garage. So the project was really threefold. It was a restoration of the public spaces, a renovation of the secondary spaces, and then there was the addition. And then there was a tremendous amount of site work that went along with it. In these 2 images, you can see the drawing room and the formal living room, both of which were kept very true to period. The interior designers opted for a Wedgwood green and a Wedgwood blue for the wall colors. All the plaster moldings are original. There was some disrepair in them, and we hired craftsmen to basically create a mold and replicate the pattern. Some of the applied plaster on the ceiling had fallen off, and once again, we had artisans come in and make molds and replicate the plaster details. All the lighting that you see in the house was original. Some of it was dual fuel and had gas lines going to it still. Clearly not a great recipe. Gas and electricity together, not a good idea. So we removed the chandeliers, had them UL listed, and then kept them in storage until the project was completed, and then we reinstalled them. Our clients really look at this house as being the stewards of this house. They're the third owners. The Rileys who built the house lived in the home for 2 generations. Their daughter Mabel basically was born in the house and died in the house. And then the previous owners, the ones who bought the house at a blind auction, lived in the house for 40-something years. And then our clients purchased it. You can see in the entry foyer, very little has changed from when the house was constructed in 1896. We removed wallpaper and applied Venetian plaster to the walls, which has this lovely reflective property to it, which you don't really see in the photos. This frieze was original, but it was painted in a hunter green with gold accents. And the interior designers toned that down to more of a platinum color with a tone-on-tone effect. All the mahogany woodwork is original and was restored. These pocket doors, there's a matching pair across the entry foyer. This one goes into that single parlor, and this side is the double parlor. They have aesthetic movement etched glass on the windows, and they work perfectly now. Unfortunately, when they purchased the house, due to some sagging, neither of the pocket doors worked, and we had to surgically insert steel beams from above in order to give that wall rigidity, and now the doors work perfectly. Additionally, because the house had these large steam radiators, which were cumbersome and took up a lot of space, we opted to go with hydronic radiant heat. So all of these original floors remained untouched, and we undermounted the hydronic radiant heat below them, and then utilized these old gravity-fed heat registers as return air ducts. And we put in a commercial HVAC system, a VRF system. So instead of having multiple condensers, there's essentially commercial cooling towers on the property. The areas of the house that we were able to take some more liberties in and really modernize were on the second floor, the basement, and the back portion of the main floor. So this is where we got into more of the renovation of the house. The original kitchen was obviously undersized. It was intended for staff use. The previous owners had done somewhat of a renovation to make it usable, but by no means was it a kitchen that was worthy of this house. There was also a food storage pantry and a butler's pantry. If you notice, there's this exterior wall where my mouse is, with this arched window sort of peeking through the glass. And then there is a door where my mouse is here in this lovely floral pantry that led you into that outdoor staircase. So that was the access from the kitchen for the servants to go downstairs to the basement, either to the laundry room or to the carriage house. And adjacent to the kitchen was what initially was a covered terrace, and then in around 1910, the previous owners, added these windows to make it an enclosed space. So this room was only accessed from the entry foyer. It was essentially a dead-end space, but it had beautiful views of the property, and it was just a really stunning space that almost felt abandoned. And due to the fact that the kitchen footprint was as small as it is, we decided that we would create an opening in this granite wall, seen here, to create a connection to the kitchen space. As you can see, there was a back stair that we eliminated. This was the vertical circulation that connected the basement to the third floor. And in doing away with it, we added a 3-stop elevator in its place. And this is now the breakfast room of the house. We added this breakfast bar with a zinc countertop. There's a dishwasher and some refrigerator drawers. So if they're having breakfast here, there's a counter and support areas for cleanup and beverage fridges. And then just to give you the context, there's this axis that connects the main kitchen through the new butler's pantry and into the breakfast room. So the whole back of the house essentially saw a major renovation. Where we were preserving the front, we basically reimagined how the back of the house would live. And this made the house functional for a young family of 6. I had mentioned in the before slide that little arch window that was peeking through. So this was formerly an exterior wall, and this was a door that accessed those stairs. So because there wasn't not an opportunity to create a family room adjacent to the kitchen, what we did is we dug out the basement and created a family room immediately below the kitchen. And this is another view. Obviously, we were dealing with 12-foot ceilings. We were not going to put soffits in, so we had the gentleman who fabricated the kitchen run the cabinetry all the way to the ceiling. We had this custom-built library ladder made so that we could access the cabinetry up at that 10-foot mark. And then, some other fun details. We added a pressed tin ceiling, which was historically accurate. The husband saw it in a restaurant in New York and sent me a picture and said, "Can we do this?" And I said, "Sure, we can." And we opted to do it in a reflective silver material, which helps add brightness and reflection. And then you can see the corner of this skylight here. The house originally had these beautiful hip roof copper skylights, and we essentially matched it and had a larger one made so that the center island is illuminated from a loft by this beautiful skylight. Another area where we saw a major change was in the primary suite. Initially, the primary suite was a 5-room suite that consisted of a sitting room, a sleeping area. Through this door was a bathroom that led to a dressing closet, and then behind this wall is a sleeping porch. This is what we ended up with. We flush framed the steel beam as much as we could, which now became that center beam in the ceiling coffer details. And then we added some faux beams to make the coffer ceiling feel intentional. The walls are clad in Gracie wallpaper. They're all hand painted. It's really a stunning space. This was the bathroom, and then basically the image that you're looking at on the left was taken from the old closet. So we eliminated the bathroom in its current location and created this beautiful dressing closet with custom furniture and fretwork and antique mercury glass and these beautiful art lights to illuminate the closet. Found an antique chandelier that the owners loved. So it really is a very special space. I mean, it was intended to look like a French boutique, and I think we hit the mark on that one. The other space that I mentioned was a sleeping porch, and that ran the whole width of the bedroom and had 2 views to the Boston skyline. So the house being situated at the highest point in Newton has sweeping views of the Belmont Hills and of Boston. So we created this marble-clad bathroom space, custom vanity, this unbelievable shower. We found these Italian marble slabs that we book matched, and the plumbing fixtures are sterling silver by Sherrill Wagner. So everything that we did, in spite of it being a modernization, there's a nod to the Gilded Age opulence of the original home. These doors that enter the primary bath were used elsewhere in the house and are also etched in that beautiful aesthetic movement motif. There's bamboo shoots and birds and sort of references to Asian artwork. The third floor of the house, which was a rabbit warren of servant quarters and multiple bedrooms and bathrooms, was simplified. It became 2 large bedroom suites for their older daughters, and then this hangout space for all the kids to use. It has a small kitchenette. It's right outside of the 2 older girls' rooms and right up the stairs from the younger 2 kids' rooms. So this is where they all sort of hang out and watch TV at night. And once again, you have unbelievable views of Boston from the third floor. And this is one of the bedrooms that is up on the third floor. A fun little detail we came up with was this bank of drawers over here on the left is actually a queen-size trundle bed that slides under the eaves. So when she has guests over, she can pull this out. There's a queen-size bed, and all of her girlfriends can hang out and have sleepovers. The basement was another area that saw a tremendous amount of renovation. As I had mentioned, it was unfinished. The ceilings were just over 8 feet. We ended up digging an additional foot out, so there's now 9-foot ceilings in the basement. And these are the stairs that bring you back up to the kitchen. So part of the struggle with retrofitting an older house for modern living is getting the adjacencies to work. Obviously there was no place for a 3-car garage on the main level because of the precipitous slope at the rear of the house. So we added the 3-car garage at the base of the kitchen stairs. So you come down the stairs, proceed to the mudroom, and then into the garage. So obviously it's not as easy as pulling into your garage and walking into your mudroom, but it created enough of a connection that it functioned well for the owners. You can also see that these arched openings that were sort of an exterior loggia now became interior space. We had custom windows built by Pella, which pushed this space out about 4 or 5 feet, and it now created this informal gathering space for the family. Other spaces in the basement certainly deviated from the historic elements of the house. This is the spa bathroom off of the gym with a lovely multi-person steam shower. And I guess every house that's this big should have a hair salon in it, so why not? And this is a mudroom, which was an addition. There's a craft table for the kids. They hang out and do homework here. It has direct access to the backyard. And then this is the lower mudroom, which brings you out to the 3-car garage. Also in the basement is a screening room, a gym, a service kitchen, a secondary kitchen for caterers, a large laundry room, and vast amounts of storage. And another fun detail, I do not have a photo of it, unfortunately. Because the house was originally built as a gentleman's farm, there were horses on the property, and there was a foot wash in his primary bathroom, which we've now incorporated into the mudroom, and it's now the dog wash. So there's this beautiful old cast iron foot wash that we've converted into a dog wash station. I had also mentioned that there was not a connection to the property. The house, as it was built, granted it was a farm, it had beautiful vistas. There was really no way for the people on the main floor to access the exterior. So we created this terrace. We replicated the finials that were on the porte cochere of the house and the balusters, and basically had molds made of those so we could recreate them. The Milford pink granite that you see cladding all the new portions, it was procured due to a very fortuitous run-in. I was at Build Boston way back when, now ABX, and saw a stone manufacturer who happened to have a small piece of this Milford pink granite. And it turns out he had bought the last remaining supply of Milford pink granite, which is what was used to clad the original house back in the 1800s. And it just so happened that he had the only remaining supply of it, and it was a perfect match. So they bought it all, and we used all of it. I had mentioned the VRF HVAC system that we had to do in the house because of the size of it. This is where we tucked the coolers. I personally really dislike seeing a condenser farm on a property, especially when every part of the property is pristine and designed. So we created this HVAC vault underneath the terrace, which works great. It's hidden from view. There's not very much noise that comes off these units, so it's not a distraction in any way if you're entertaining outside. And then you can see here, this is a space that was designed over the 3-car garage. It's intended to be, you know, a chauffeur's apartment or some sort of a guest apartment, but it's truly used as a recreation space for the kids. And that's seen here. You'll notice that the butler's pantry cabinetry went to good use. It is now used in this space. So obviously this is a modern space, but we wanted to tie in elements from the original house to make it feel like it belonged. And this is the 2-car garage structure that had been added, but this slide is really mostly to illustrate the lack of connection between the main floor of the house and the exterior. Another shot here showing these arched areas that were a loggia, and these are now the corner of that family room space, and the addition sort of infills from here, as you can see in this image. So we created a terrace off the lower level, a terrace off the upper level, with a staircase that connects the two, all clad in Milford pink granite. And then this is the overall view of the rear of the house. So the old house ended here, and we replicated the arch for the entry into the mudroom, and then created semi-detached carriage house, pulling details from the porte cochere at the front of the house to reference the style. The other thing is that this space here, this sort of neoclassical temple that is just precariously perched on top of the house, this is where the primary bathroom is. And this rounded space is where that breakfast room is, just to give you the context of where things are on the property. And then this is the kitchen with the access to the terrace. The net result is a livable house that stays true to the history of the original estate. We won a Qualified Remodelers Masters of Design Award for this, Prism Gold Award, and we also won a Newton Preservation Award for this. So it's a project that was incredibly fun and, I mean, really enriching. It was the first time I'd ever worked on a project of this size with a budget this large, and it came out beautifully, and we're very happy with the outcome. And similarly, the house in Weston was one that we basically got in at the ground level. Our clients retained us before they even had found a piece of property. The contractor on the project, Concept Building, and my firm were retained, and we basically were looking at multiple sites for the owners of the property to build their dream house. They had ideas and concepts that they wanted to follow, but they stylistically really didn't have much of a direction as to what they wanted this house to look like or where this house was even going to be. But when we found this property, we knew it was the right spot. It's a 4-acre site that backs up to the Weston Reservoir. The previous house on the property was a small cape, and all of this was heavily vegetated forest land, and the rear property line being the Weston Reservoir. One of the main factors that our clients were looking for was a sloped site. They knew that they wanted a walkout basement and a lower level that had access to the site, and finding a piece of property that had enough of a slope to it so that we could execute that took some time, but we all knew the second we saw this property that it was the right spot for our client's house. As I'd mentioned, they didn't have a stylistic direction. This was done in 2019, which was the dawn of the modern farmhouse movement. We had just done a modern farmhouse that had gotten us a bit of publicity and had been published, but I personally was feeling that the modern farmhouse was going to become a date stamp, that you'd look at it and you'd know that house was done sometime between 2018 and 2021. Not to say that there's anything wrong with modern farmhouses, but these people wanted something that exuded a sense of timelessness, and my fear was that the modern farmhouse would not do that. So they knew they wanted something modern. They knew that they wanted large volumes of spaces. And this was when we started the process of looking for inspiration images. So if they felt like they wanted something timeless, I felt like looking at referential images from the turn of the 20th century that were sort of the onset of American modernism was a good place to start. So we looked at options by Green and Green. This is a Gamble house in Pasadena. We looked at Frank Lloyd Wright options as well. This is Wing Spread. But it was the Roby house and the Hollyhock house that they really found to be the most inspiring. You know, they loved the horizontality of the Roby house, which is, you know, a later Frank Lloyd Wright Prairie style home. It's a much more elevated version of his early Prairie styles. They loved the ribbon windows. They loved the deep eave overhangs and the hip roofs. But they also found something very compelling about the monolithic appearance and the cubism of the Hollyhock house, which is a later Frank Lloyd Wright project in California. So the net result of that was developing a home that had references to both the Prairie style and to more cubist modernism. So we have these horizontal bands of stone, which sort of creates a plinth for the house, and the long, low-slung hip roofs give a sense of harmony with nature and the site. You know, we reference the Hollyhock house with this monolithic concrete portal that houses the front door. You know, part of the challenge of designing a house that's this large is making it feel like it's scaled properly and doesn't overpower the lot. So on the exterior and the interior, we had to play with the scale and work with objects that were larger to fool the eye into thinking that the house isn't as massive as it actually is. Of course, when you turn the corner and go to the rear of the house, there's no question that this is a fairly large house. But we pulled the datum of stone around from the front, and it gives the house a sense of a plinth that it sits on and that it sort of grows out of the site. The landscape walls and the lower elevation are clad in the same stone. So it almost feels like that lower level is part of the site. Oh, and once again, an HVAC vault, because I don't like condenser farms. So we created this space underneath the garage to accommodate all the HVAC equipment for the house. And onto the interior. Obviously, not like a Frank Lloyd Wright house on the interior. You know, Wright was known for creating intimate spaces that had compressed volumes, and that was not something that our clients wanted. They wanted something that felt grand and had large volumes of space. But by pulling nature and natural materials into the interiors, it helps give a sense of warmth and coziness in spite of the massive volumes that we were contending with. There are two axes on this property within the house. You have the front door axis as you walk in and you can see straight through to the exterior. Then there's a secondary axis that connects the house side to side. So from the mudroom, you walk in through the side entrance and there's a slate floor, once again using white oak and natural materials to infuse the house with warmth. And then you have this east to west axis that starts from the mudroom door and terminates at the entry to the primary suite. Once again, bringing the outdoors in was something that was very important to our clients. So all of the spaces on the main floor have a relationship to the exterior. If you can't walk out to the patio from the first floor, you can certainly see out. So there's all sorts of indoor-outdoor play, both with materials and with views. Once again, a view that illustrates the connection between the exterior and the interior. This is that great room space, and this is the kitchen, and then this is the lower level, which I will be showing you upcoming. Oh, and the primary suite is located here, also with access to the main floor terrace. Natural light, as I mentioned, was something that was very important to our clients. You can see at any time of the day with the ribbon windows and with the various skylights, multiple rooms of the house are just flooded with light. This is a dining room hallway with the dining room here to the left. Another hip roof skylight, but this one we ended up hanging this very cool fixture from the skylight. These are LED monospots which illuminate these blown glass pieces, and the effect is really dramatic at night. This is a really beautiful space to be in. It just feels warm and inviting in spite of being in such a large volume. Another space that was very important to our clients was the kitchen. Like everyone, this is the hub of the house. They wanted to have a kitchen where you could have bar seating, as well as a breakfast area and a butler's pantry. And this is the space that sort of leads you from the kitchen into the dining hallway and then across into the dining space. The interior designers did this really cool gold leaf ceiling treatment, which picks up on the tones of the hardware and the faucets. In addition to the kitchen being the hub of the house, they also wanted adjacencies to the neighboring spaces to feel strong. So this great room space, which is the hub of the house, really visually has a kitchen off one side and then a family room off the other, and the doors are enfilade. They're in alignment with one another. So when the doors are open and you're in the kitchen, you have this axis view from the kitchen into the family room and also into the great room. So this allows, if the kids are in the family room and the parents are in the great room, or someone's in the kitchen, there's always the ability, in spite of the size of the house, for there to be a visual on their kids who are now 8-year-old twins. And this is a shot of the den finished, the family room. Another shot of that. The lower level, as I mentioned, was a huge factor in this project. They wanted it walkout. They knew that they wanted some specialty spaces down there. And they also wanted to make sure that even though it was subterranean in the front, that they would be afforded natural light. So we created this window well, which actually goes down at the front stair, and then the windows above it continue and illuminate the upper run of stairs. We did these view rail, monorail stair systems, which came out really nicely. And then we did this sort of faux reflecting pool using high polished absolute black granite. And it was a spot to showcase some of their sculptural art. The recreation room in the basement is intended for the family to entertain. There's a bar, there's multiple sitting areas, and this space here, which is really the pièce de résistance of the house, which is an aditarium, which has a plunge pool. This is that recreation room space before it was finished. The indoor pool area has a summer kitchen. We designed this really cool teak trellis and column wrap just to, once again, infuse the interior with natural elements. We clad the walls in this thin stone veneer, once again, just to bring natural elements into the space. And then this is the view out. So these are stacking slider doors, so this room can open entirely to the exterior. And this is a vapor mist fireplace. When we were doing, working with the folks who were doing the climate control within the natarium, they were not keen on the idea of a fireplace that would introduce heat. So this is a fireplace that is LED lights and vapor, and I don't know how they do it and what magic trickery they're doing, but it legitimately looks like a roaring fire, and it's visible from both the inside and the outside, so you can experience it from the outside as well. And beyond the hot tub room is a large sauna We opted to clad it in the same material that we did the columns in, just for continuity. And then beyond that, a full gym. And then, of course, what house wouldn't be complete with a screening room? Our clients had a screening room in their previous home, which was beneath their dining room. And when the kids or the parents were in there watching, the whole house would shake. So we saw an opportunity to excavate underneath the garage and locate the screening room there. So it's under a corrugated metal and concrete deck. It's surrounded in concrete, so they can be in there blasting movies with heavy bass, and you do not hear it anywhere throughout the house. So if ever in the future I can figure out a place to put a home theater under a garage, I will absolutely do it again. And then what 13,000 square foot house wouldn't be complete without its own hair salon? So funny story, during COVID, my clients from the Weston project came to my project in Newton that I previously showed you guys to try out their theater chairs because it was COVID and they didn't want to go out. So we're trying out the chairs in one client's house, and the husband went wandering, and then we hear him calling from the other room, and he's in the hair salon at the Bellevue project. And he's like, why are we doing this? So we ended up taking what was going to be their number 2 Costco storage room, and now they're just down to 1 Costco storage room, but they have a hair salon. So it was an idea that was born of them visiting my other project, and they saw this hair salon and they wanted one too. So now they have one also. The primary suite, which I had mentioned previously, is on the main floor. The goal of this project was these people wanted to build this house once. They never want to move. They want to be able to age in place and have a house where they have very few steps and they can navigate this house well into their old age. So this is the hallway that accesses the primary suite. Once again, we did this antique nickel glass like we did in the project on Bellevue. And once again, accompanied it with white oak, just making the spaces feel as cohesive as possible as you enter from the public portion of the house into the primary suite. There's really not much of a change in finish level. It certainly feels like part of the formal section of the house. And a close-up of the primary suite, once again, utilizing white oak to create this ceiling coffer detail. The suite is comprised of her bathroom and his bathroom, her closet, his closet, and the sleeping chamber. This is a view of her bathroom. And not to leave him out, this is a view of his closet. And then, you know, as I had mentioned, we partnered with Prairie Design, the interior designers on the project, who are fantastic. And we've worked with them on multiple projects. So we worked with them to scale these light fixtures and to create all the millwork and trim details within the house. So this is the ceiling of the great room. As you saw in the previous view of the space, this chandelier is absolutely massive. But it was as we were going through the process of working with the interior designers to help them find light fixtures, everything needed to be scaled up. If you thought a fixture that was 36 inches top to bottom was going to be sufficient, we'd look at it in the space and it would feel absolutely diminutive. So everything in this house is just gargantuanly portioned. And, you know, this is an image that shows what we call the gate into the dining room. All these moves were made to help bring the scale into sort of a more human scale, because we're talking about 20, 30-foot ceilings that dropping beams and creating these sort of moments where, you know, we're bringing the scale down and using these large fixtures to bring the scale down. It was really necessary in this space so that it wouldn't feel like you were, you know, dwarfed by the scale of the interior. This is just a fun little detail where we did a 4-way book match at the end of the the beam to just really drive home that craftsmanship was a key factor in this, like it would have been in a Frank Lloyd Wright or Prairie style home. And then I can't take any credit for this. This was the powder room that was designed by Prairie Design, but you might recognize it as the cover of New England Home from last month, where this house was featured in the January-February edition. And that wraps it up. These are two very special projects, both of which have won us a few awards and gotten us published. And once again, it's a testimonial to the fact that, people with similar budgets and similar demographic profiles don't want the same things. And as someone who has an opportunity to work on a various palette of styles, it's really exciting to be able to go from a project like this project on Bellevue to this project in Weston and have clients who are thrilled with the outcome and also something that we as a firm are very proud of. So I'd be happy to take some questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, David. Great work. I'm going to open it up first to attendees if there are any questions. I mean, I have a boatload if we need prompting to kick off the Q&A session. Are there any questions from anybody?
I have a question.
Oh,
Rhiannon.
Rhiannon has a question.
So how do you address with these large volume spaces, how do you address heating the space? Because I live in a loft, 10-foot, 12-foot ceilings, and I'm continually dealing with trying to keep where you live warm enough.
I mean,
good question, Rhiannon.
It is a very good question. And the answer is that we have really good engineers and subcontractors that we refer to our clients to help with these. We worked with Combined Energy Solutions on the project in Weston, and we worked with a gentleman named Bruce McRitchie on the house on Bellevue. It isn't easy to balance heating and cooling in volumes like this. And it's certainly not something that I know how to do. I mean, that takes an advanced engineering degree. So, but yeah, I mean, there are certainly people out there, and it's critical to get that right, because no one wants to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on a house and then have it be too hot or too cold.
Do you do radiant heated floors anywhere?
Yes, both these houses have radiant heat all over. The house on Bellevue, the radiant heat on the main floor is a primary source of heat in the house.
Interesting.
People are probably wondering where I am.
Yeah.
I kind
Hi, David. Eduardo Sorate here from Hasin.
Hi.
Congratulations on these projects, both beautiful. You can tell that a lot of thought has gone into so many corners of this. Regarding actually the heating, in touching on Rhiannon's point, you did mention that on Bellevue, you installed the radiant heating without touching the existing floors. You did it all from below. How does one go about that?
So because the basement was unfinished, we basically mounted the PEX, the hydronic tubing. They make these little clips that you affix to the underside of the floor, and we just ran the tubing underneath the floorboards.
So there's no subfloor?
There must be a subfloor. Yeah, there's a subfloor underneath the finished floors. So, obviously in an effort to preserve the original floors, they basically had enough left on them for one more screening. We couldn't even sand them. So, in the interest of preserving them, we mounted it underneath. But yes, there absolutely is a subfloor. So the hydronic system is mounted to the subfloor, and my sense is that the subfloor heats up enough that it transfers to the oak above it.
Oh, interesting. Very impressive.
And then the VRF system has a supplemental heat pump. So if on very cold days the radiant is not sufficient, that heat pump will kick on, and then there'll also be forced hot air.
Amazing that you got that same stone for the house in Newton.
I know.
That's like a miracle.
It was a miracle.
Is the Weston home passive home, David, or close?
No. It's a beast. It's more like passive aggressive home. Screw you, environment.
There you go. There you go. Was there any stone restoration done on the Bellevue home on the existing?
A bit. So the previous owners really took exceptional care of the home. They had done most of the heavy lifting for the exterior restoration. There was some repointing needed. This upper level here is a brick, and there needed to be some repointing done on that, some repointing on the chimneys. But generally speaking, the previous owners had done a wonderful job preserving the carcass of the house. Questionable things on the interior stylistically, but
That's incredible.
David, can you talk about, well, both of these projects were prior to the current residential energy code, correct? So probably not as strict as what we're facing now, but could you talk a little bit about meeting energy code in an existing structure, one with a masonry facade, and a new build, and how you might approach those differently from a conceptual standpoint?
absolutely. I mean, as you know, the new energy code is driving a lot of our design decisions these days. The saving grace of the project on Bellevue is that because it's historic, we could probably meet prescriptive on that and not have to go full stretch code. Obviously, you know, there's many details on the interior that you wouldn't want to denude in order to get spray foam into the cavities. So a house like Bellevue, even if we were to start on a project like this now, I think there'd be some leniency. However, if you're dealing with an older home that's not on a national register or in a historic district in a town, you know, we're facing a lot of complications. You know, we're doing a project in Wellesley right now where we may have to strip off all the siding and do a zip wall system and then reapply new siding just to hit that HERS number. You know, obviously building from scratch is much easier. It's always been easier on some level because you have full control over the project. So there are many projects where people will reach out to us and wanting to do $1 million renovation on their older home. And, you know, once we evaluate what's currently there and what needs to be done, it may actually be a cheaper path to tear the house down and start new. But, you know, obviously on older houses, you'll have to either replace the windows or put storms on or figure out some way to improve the thermal condition of the windows. You know, you're going to have to strip many of the interior walls and the roof structure from the interior and fill those cavities with spray foam. Yeah, it's quite aggressive. So working in older homes is going to become much more complex with the stretch code. And obviously with the new construction project, you can handle that. You can manage that. And it's part of the details that we're drawing to construct the house. But I'm sure it's something that all of us are contending with and trying to figure out how to navigate. Did that answer your question, Daniel?
Yes, yes. Thank you. Or at least scratches the surface, right? Because we can dive deep into energy code. I had a question about the second house versus the the second house versus the first. It seems that the second owners had possibly a larger art collection. Can you talk a little bit about introducing art into spaces and overall design? And how much do you encounter that the client has an art budget or has a collection that needs to be incorporated?
Oddly enough, the modern Prairie house, they had a few pieces of art that, I mean, quite frankly, the interior designers really handled that. the house on Bellevue actually has a much more robust art collection. And I think a lot of it might have still been in storage when we did the initial round of photography. But, when especially if it's a new construction house and we know that there are pieces of art that they want featured, we'll certainly leave locations where they can display their artwork. The house on Bellevue, we didn't have that much liberty because the space was a space. But they have large scale modern pop art throughout their house. They have, I think a 8-foot Keith Haring mural in their family room. So, I mean, the art juxtaposes the style of the house, but it somehow manages to work really nicely. They have a bunch of Damien Hirst and, all very large format. And yeah, but we don't really get into the nitty gritty with the interiors as much. If we know that there are pieces that they want displayed, like that sculpture that we placed at the bottom of the stairs at the Weston project, we knew that spot was going to be the X and O. But really, if we're partnering with an interior designer on the project, we sort of leave that to them.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Sorry.
David, what's the cladding on the Weston house? Is that like a polyash over the
It's
stone?
actually all oral.
Oral, yeah, polyash.
Yep, it's a nickel gap and then a shiplap.
Very nice. Okay, thank you.
David, could you talk a little bit about when you're starting a project? Like in the Bellevue house, there is an established architectural language, right? And I've encountered sometimes clients want to make any addition or renovation seem like it's always been there, right? Or I've seen people want to go against it, create something entirely new. What do you guys talk about internally with your team when you're starting a project that has an established language? And then what is your process and how does it compare and contrast for like the second house when, you showed us a little bit about starting the conversation around Frank Lloyd Wright, references, things like that. Is there a comparison contrast that you can make between the two, or does it happen organically? Does the client drive that? Do you drive that?
Yeah. So with the Bellevue project, because it's a historic landmark, we didn't have a lot of latitude in what we did with the exterior. We knew it had to pay homage to the house and feel intentional and look like it belonged. Mm-hmm. And also my clients are true preservationists. They wanted the house to feel original. But if it were someone different that wanted something a little bit more modern that sort of juxtaposed the architecture, I would be totally open to that. I mean, I'm not that much of a purist when it comes to preservation. I think that if something respects the architecture and lets the main house be the star and then creating something that's secondary to it, I think that there's certainly flexibility to, jumble the language a little bit. I wouldn't love if there was a steel and glass structure, attached to this house. But, you see it done and it's done nicely. And, it's probably not something that I would instinctively do. We played around with the carriage house and, doing more of a back house aesthetic, doing something that almost referenced the carriage house that had been part of the property, which had a gambrel roof and had a little bit more of a informal massing. And, we played around with that, but at the end of the day, they wanted the back of the house to feel as important as the front. They wanted the details on the porte cochere to be sort of carried through and reflected on the addition that we designed. And moreover, from these spaces here, this structure is prominent. So you see it, from the interior space. They just wanted it to feel like it belonged. And then the process of finding inspiration for the project on in Weston, you know, they really gave us a lot of breadth to sort of figure out what it was that we were designing. They really came to the table with ideas about how the space should flow and how it should feel, but they knew what they liked when they saw it, but they, you know, she kept using, she wanted something modern, and I'd show her pictures of modern houses, you know, like that are around here. She's like, no, that's too modern. She's like, I want the inside to feel modern, but I want it to feel timeless. So that sort of started me on my path of what does timelessness and modernism look like together? You know, obviously we learned about Mies van der Rohe and Le Corbusier and all these folks in school, and, you know, and that's, you know, late 1800s, early 1900s. And you look at, you know, Mies projects and you look at Corbu projects, and they're still referenced and they still feel modern. So, you know, I showed them some Richard Meyer stuff, then she felt like that was too modern. So it was really, you know, finding what it was that spoke to her aesthetic. And it was Frank Lloyd Wright, it was Green and Green, it was, you know, it was modernism that still had some sort of rooting in nature, which really sort of spoke to them. And I mean, so it was really just, you know, sitting down with books and going through them and like dog-earing things with her, and then figuring out how to make what she wanted from an interior perspective and from a flow perspective jive with what they wanted from this overall exterior appearance.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions? I have a couple.
What sort of
Go ahead.
time frame was involved on either project, from, you know, the purchase of the land to construction?
So what was that, Michael? How long?
What was the time frame for the design on all your company's part, from the initial requirement of the properties to construction? How long?
You know what? I think these were both about 2 years, from the time we put pen to paper to the time that the clients moved in. Granted, the house in Weston was in the thick of COVID, so you know, they were maybe 2 months behind schedule because of, you know, having to shut the site down a couple times because of infections and whatnot. But the project on Bellevue, our clients moved in prior to the carriage house being completed, but it was about 2 years before they could get into the house and live there without workers being there. And then similarly, about 2 years.
Very good.
And we're about to start another project at the Weston house to do a party barn.
There's always a
'Cause it's
phase
not big
2,
enough.
right? There's always a phase 2. Can you talk about permitting issues? One is in an urban neighborhood, the other one was out in a more rural setting. Did you encounter any permitting challenges related to either of these?
Yes.
You're smiling.
Not. Yes, the house on Bellevue, we had a lot of pushback from 3 of the residents in the townhouses and the neighbor in the house that's sort of this direction. They are not fans of change. They did not want us doing the project. They did not want us building the structure. They fought us every chance that they could. But at the end of the day, you know, you can't argue with what's done by right. You know, obviously there's a preservation restriction on the lot where we added the driveway. We couldn't build any structures. They were arguing that a driveway is a structure, not a structure. In spite of the fact that this 7,000 square foot driveway is heated with radiant heat. Still not a structure.
Mhm. How about on the
Um,
Weston project?
I'm
You
trying to
you said
remember. There were a couple folks who weren't thrilled with the removal of trees, but obviously, there's tree bylaws, and whatever you take down, you have to put back. And
Mhm.
we were doing everything as we were supposed to be doing it. A couple, old timers who had grown up in Weston and walked through these woods were like, I used to walk through these woods. We don't want a house there, but it's not a valid argument. I mean, things
Yeah.
change, you know. But yeah, I mean, permitting on the Bellevue project was definitely much more tenuous. We went to a couple town hearings for the Weston one and got it through relatively quickly.
Uh-huh.
What's
On
the
the Weston,
closest house to the western one?
What did
The
you
one
say,
they're
Rhiannon?
buying to tear down.
No, I was asking what the closest house to the Weston project was.
Oh, I assume the Weston is on a septic system?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And a
That's
big
why the
one.
grass is so green.
Beautiful.
Um,
Yeah, it's interesting how many people come out of the woodwork during the permitting process, and as long as you're keeping it by right, your chances are, yeah, if you're following the letter of the law, it's they have very little
that's
right
always
to
a
say.
goal.
Yeah, I mean, people suddenly start to educate themselves about their zoning bylaws at that point, and then they're like, well, why is that allowed? Well, start going to some meetings if that is really of an interest to you. I find that around
Exactly.
ADUs a lot, when people are trying to put an ADU in the existing structure, and it's like, we don't want more. It's like, they can do it by right. Go talk to
It's
your
actually
council person.
encouraged.
It's actually encouraged, yeah. So I always find that interesting to understand what the challenges are from a regulatory standpoint as you get into it. Any other questions? We're at 1:13. Any feedback from your clients after they've lived in these homes now for a while? Things that they would have changed, things that they would, spent more on, spent less on? What do they use? What do they not use?
The project on Bellevue, I think in an ideal world, they would have enlarged the kitchen
Uh-huh.
and given more work area within the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
We did come up with a plan initially that enclosed this upper portion of the terrace and
Mm-hmm.
created additional space within the kitchen. And we ended up not doing it because they didn't feel it was necessary. That's the only change that I believe that they would really make in the house, is just having a larger kitchen. I think the folks in the modern Prairie house are thrilled. They're hiring us to do another project for them on the property. So
That's
I
good.
guess, they need a basketball court or something.
What did your team learn internally? These are large projects, a lot of moving parts and pieces, a lot of internal communication, external communication. What did you guys learn from these? You said that the Bellevue project was really your first project of this scale. I find that ratcheting it up, not necessarily from a budget standpoint, but just the amount of information that's being generated and communicated between all the different parties takes you to a different level in the way you have to operate internally. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So the Bellevue project was done before most of my team was brought on. This project is about 10 years old. My initial partner, the one who moved out to Colorado, had a background in commercial design. So she was fantastic at managing this. It really had the elements of a commercial project. So, but on the Weston project, that was my current team. And, one of the project architects manages everything. I basically do the upfront design. I work with the clients to sort of establish, the roadmap and get the basic details, exterior elevations, plans tight enough that it can be passed on to the project architect. And the project architect really sort of manages all the moving pieces. And then so because there was so much of an interiors component, it was both Jane as a project architect and Liana as the sort of head of the interior design team that basically worked with Breyer Design to make sure all of their information made it into the drawing set. Liana was doing all the millwork detailing and all the decorative millwork and all that kind of stuff. So all the drawings were basically managed by my office, and any sort of information that was fed to us from whether it's engineers or design consultants would be organized by our firm and managed internally. We met weekly on site. Both these projects required weekly site meetings. So, and basically until punch list is done, we're there and we're boots on the ground. When a project of this size is under construction, we're usually on site more than once a week, because when things come up or situations arise, the contractor calls us in. So, I'm very, very fortunate that my team is as fantastic as they are. We've all been doing this for a long time. The youngest person in the office is 40. So, there's a lot of years. What's that?
Ancient.
What'd you say? Interesting?
Ancient.
No, I said ancient.
So old.
Yeah, so old. That's a little tongue-in-cheek, David.
I didn't hear that, didn't you? What's that?
I said it's a little tongue-in-cheek.
I know. I'm not the youngest in the office. I am way more than 40.
No, but I think that you bring up a good point. I mean, being around different types of construction like this and the issues that are come up, being able to foresee what the issues are going to be and kind of get out ahead of them and start addressing them either with the client or the build team to keep things moving, I think really just requires experience to some degree, that you've seen this before and you know what questions to ask, right? Versus not knowing what you don't know, right?
Like knowing the right people to bring in if you don't know the answers to those questions.
Yes, thank you. Yep. I have one last comment, but before we wrap it up, unless somebody else has a question, but I'm always not astonished. I find it interesting that projects of this scale, you're in the multi-millions, right? In terms of construction, finishes, site work, things like that. That when you're, and whether you have an established relationship with a client or not, and I think on Bellevue you did, but it's always interesting to me figuring out what they value and where they want to spend money, because even though to some degree it is an open checkbook, there still is a budget, and you don't understand sometimes that budget. There is no budget until suddenly there becomes a budget. And we've all, when they can have anything that they want and they start saying no or yes to, I don't find that important, I find this important. That whole process to me is something that you can't sometimes take from client to client, because you're getting to know them, what they value, and where they want to spend their money. And it's more of an observation than it is anything else. I don't know. Have you seen that as well when you're dealing?
Absolutely.
Because I mean, if they decided to spend X million versus Y million, I don't think that they're going to be running out of funds in either of these situations. And so it's just, where do they want to spend their money because they value it and it's important to them and their family versus spending it in other locations.
Yeah. We bring up the subject of value engineering fairly early on in the design phase. People always disclose to some extent where they want to be budgetarily.
Yeah.
And, we'll be designing and they'll be making suggestions and asking if they can add X, Y, and Z. And then we say, this might be something you have to value engineer out. This is definitely going to push you over your target budget. We're happy to draw it. It takes very little time and very little money to draw an idea, but the price might be prohibitive. And you know, generally speaking, on any project we do, you know, we have a sense of where the client wants to be budgetarily. We have a sense of what things cost. And if there's ever sort of, you know, a major obvious discrepancy, we call it to their attention before we spend time drawing something that's not going to be feasible within the disclosed budget.
Mm-hmm.
So we let them make that decision. You know, we're doing a large project right now in Needham where, you know, they're spending a tremendous amount of money, but you know, there's certain things that are just thresholds that are too far.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're spending $500,000 on their kitchen cabinetry, but you know, a faucet that's $1,000 just is like ridiculous to them. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, and everyone has their thing. So it's our job to sort of work within those confines, meet them where they are, make recommendations. And if they don't like the recommendations, then they have to spend a little more money. That's their decision to make.
Yeah. I also find with houses of this stature, we're also a guide to say, you know, you do need to put in X refrigerator and maybe even a backup versus just going to Home Depot and buying an LG. There's nothing wrong with an LG refrigerator, but if they ever have to sell or if it ever has to be put on the market, people are expecting certain amenities and features within a home of this stature. And we're also there as a guide to say, it really needs to be a 3-car garage, you know, instead of a 1-car or a 2-car. So I don't know, these are just all very interesting discussions, right? That we have with our clients at this price point, at this budget point.
Yep. No, it's very true. And you have to be honest. You know, you can't tell people what they want to hear because eventually they'll find out that you're blowing smoke up something.
Exactly. Are there any other questions? Well, David, thank you so much for preparing this. Thank you for bearing with the postponement and rescheduling. And I think this is, you know, a great peek behind the curtain.
Thank you.
I hope you learned something too as you put it together.
Well, I learned that I don't love speaking for an hour, so that's great.
Well, you only have to do it once a year.
You've got the best voice for it too.
Yeah, it's a nice deep commanding voice.
Great job. Thank you, David.
Yeah, great
Thanks for
job.
coming,
Thank you.
Michael.
Thanks for sharing your work. I think you
You
should
bet.
be proud of what you're doing. So,
Thank you.
all right, everybody. So watch for next month. Again, it's going to be Jill Neubauer and her team. It's more of a coastal application, and we should start getting that scheduled, or you should start seeing communications about that probably in the next week or two. But that's on April 17th, same time, 12 noon to 1:30, and look forward to that. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone take care.
Thank you very much.